Hello everybody and welcome back to the Fortress of Solitude. Today we're going to be checking out Kneel Before Zod issue 7 by Joe Casey and Dan McDade. Zod's battle with the Emerald Empress heats up as the Emerald Eye of Ekron finds fallacy. The Empress herself powers her up, allowing her to attack Zod. So if you're not particularly familiar with Emerald Empress's backstory, she's kind of a crazy character. She's got a lot of mental problems and they make her see everyone in the world around her as Pharos, the Duke who once imprisoned her. And that is exactly what happens here, as now that she's got her powers back, she begins seeing Zod and the prisoners as the Duke and thus attacks them because of it. Doing this causes Zod to stand up for the prisoners, as I assumed in my review of my last issue that he would, meaning that Zod inadvertently becomes kind of like their champion and he's there protecting them really just because they are going to be his army. He needs these followers to help with whatever he has planned wherever he goes next. So he's kind of just keeping them alive just for that. He doesn't really care about them and he makes it known he does not care about them, but he wants to keep the army somewhat, at full strength. Zod trying to stop the Emerald Empress doesn't end well, as both her and the Eye escape deeper into the ship, not before taking out the ship's engines during their attack. I'm really liking Zod having to deal with all of these problems that he can't just punch away, because that's a kind of a big Zod thing in the past. If it's not something he can just, fight and attack, then he's not really interested in it. So I like that Joe Casey is throwing him all these problems that he can't just do that with, like how to get this ship working again. Where is he taking the ship? Is it now in jeopardy? Is he just got to die in space now? He's got all these things to weigh up that as the leader he would have to deal with, and I like that he has to sort of deal with that and deal with these problems that are coming up with him wanting to lead these people. Zod also uses the prisoner spokesperson Mers, who we met last issue, to help make decisions, and I like that Joe continues that sort of mutual respect they have for one another, where Zod knows that he's keeping the prisoners in line and will kind of look the other way a little bit to what he is up to, what Mers is up to, taking a cell for himself and kind of bettering his own life on this ship. And we get some sneaky plot exposition here, as Mers knows all about the Duke of Orlando that the Empress was talking about, as well as what the Eye of Ekron is, things that Zod believes are just myths and legends. Their chat is interrupted as the ship's hangar erupts into a fight that garners the attention of the Emerald Empress herself, who believes the Duke is using these people as playthings and entertainment, making them fight for his amusement, and she ends up using the deadly green flames of the Eye to burn these people to the bone, basically. And just in her way, it's her freeing these people, which is really quite interesting. It just shows you she's like insane. She's an insane person, and I like that Zod has to go up against something like this, something more evil than he is. I quite like how Dan McDade portrays the Eye's power as well. It's either like this overpowering green light that, blasts all these people, or it's a deadly green flame that burns people to their bones. Like what happens to one guy when he tries to grab the orb and sort of restrain it. He just gets crisped almost immediately. And the way the orb moves and attacks people like this reminds me of things like Heavy Metal and the green orb in that, the Loch-Nah in Heavy Metal. That's very similar to that, and I wouldn't be surprised if Dan McDade and Joe Casey sought inspiration from that, because it's very much similar. The only thing the Eye is missing is the creepy voice that the Loch-Nah and Heavy Metal has. Battle with the Empress comes to an abrupt halt when the ship rams into the head of Ekron, the giant monster the Green Eye belongs to that just kind of came out of hyperspace in front of the ship. This really surprised me, since I didn't think Casey would be giving us kind of deep Emerald Empress lore here, since that giant alien head materializing in space is just like so insane. Like it's crazy. It's so cool as well. I love the design of the head. It's just a literal big head with like robotic parts at the neck that sort of like claw its way through space. It's really creepy. Zod ends up protecting more of his prisoners from the Empress, getting a real Superman kind of hands on the hips moment as he protects a white Martian from green fire. But Zod soon finds out why he's weakening around the Eye, and that's because its power is magical, which is something Zod never has to properly face. He's never really had to deal with, since he's mainly been, the space guy, dealing with Superman if he ever appears. So I like that it's something new and different for him to experience and have to deal with, and he has no idea how to deal with it, so he doesn't exactly know what it is. So he has no defense against it, and I like that he has to deal with that. Surprisingly, the Kryptonian and the prisoners are saved by Graf. Well, I don't say saved, I say more so their fight is interrupted, as he's the dog-like being from the last issue who was attacked by the Emerald Empress, and he has left the medical bay and he arrives just in the nick of time to blow Emerald Empress and Zod out of the airlock, leaving them to get eaten by Ekron. Luckily though, Ekron, once he gets his eye back and it rematerializes up in his eye socket, he vomits out Zod and he returns to the ship, where Graf is in the middle of committing a mutiny, since that was his whole thing when we first introduced to him last issue. He wanted to commit a mutiny against Zod and actually mentioned blowing him out of an airlock, and I like that they make mention of that here about how easy it was and how people were just cowards and didn't want to try it, but it was so easy. Zod of course returns covered in like this bile green blood stuff that Ekron had vomited him up in, and it was kind of an interesting look for him to deliver this really quite cool speech where he talks about loyalty and how none of the prisoners have it and they should be so lucky that they are alive because of him, thus they owe their loyalty to him. And I like that he ends the speech with freezing a prisoner with his freeze breath and just kicking his head off, calling him weak and, you know, too little too late for him to start groveling now. Zod retreats to his quarters to heal a little bit and deal with the ship now drifting through space without an engine, of course, but something else actually ends up happening and Zod is unable to rest as he's alerted to something approaching the ship, and that something is the Red Lantern Sinestro, who doesn't look too happy to see Zod at all, and that's probably because Sinestro has just appeared in the Sinister Sons book where he was dealing with the kid who pretended to be his son or was his son, as well as Lor-Zod, who was the other lead of that book, and of course Lor-Zod's Zod's son, who's been outcast. So I have to imagine Zod and Sinestro have some words coming to each other about parenting or something, and that would be quite interesting. That's like a pairing you would never actually really think about, but one that I'm really intrigued to see. Zod and Sinestro, a Red Lantern Sinestro at that. Both of these characters have a great anger for what happened to their worlds basically as well, because Sinestro of course is dealing with New Karuga being destroyed, and he recently in Green Lantern left that world to go and find out what happened, so maybe we're seeing storylines get tied together, which is really quite cool. But either way, I'm really excited to see what Joe Casey does with both of these characters. Kneel Before Zod issue 7 was a fantastic action-packed issue that really lent on Dan McDay's wonderful looking artwork, green tinged artwork throughout this entire issue, thanks to the arrival of the Emerald Empress, an interesting new foil for Zod to have to fight, a magical villain, something Zod never really has to fight all that much, but I like that Joe Casey is taking Zod in some new and interesting places. I'm looking forward to seeing what he has in store for us now that he's teaming him up with Sinestro next issue as well. I'm going to give this issue a 9 out of 10.